From Empress Palace in Johannesburg, South Africa's public service and union leaders gathered for 3 electrifying days of bold dialogue and strategic exchange. With education-labor disputes at the core, participants tackled the evolving terrain of employment justice through gripping case studies and visionary insights. Fresh thinking emerged, alliances were strengthened, and practical solutions took shape, responding to the demands of a shifting global economy. From dialogue to impact, witness the moments that moved South Africa's labor future.
I am going to call upon the chairperson for the ELRC, Dr. Bono, to come start us off. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, this is our gala dinner, and we just urge you to sit back, relax, and enjoy yourself this evening as we wind down all of those conversations. Over to you, Chair.
Let me take this opportunity to welcome all our dignitaries, our keynote speaker, Professor Halton Chidl, the DG of Basic Education. I don't know if he's in yet. I'm working from outside. The DG of the Department of Higher Education and Training, all heads of department, the leaders of trade unions. I've seen them, the CEOs of education bodies, the PSCBC, which is in our midst, the South African Judicial Education Institute, and everybody in the room. We come together every year to celebrate what we've achieved in education. Every stride that we take together brings us closer to shaping a generation of educated learners who will grow our economy, advance social progress, and help build our nation that we dream of. The past year was a great year for the ELRC, as Council recorded a 97 achievement in the 2024-2025 financial year and a clean audit outcome. That's proof of our dedication to excellence and solid governance. Tonight we stand united in our mission to keep improving the quality of education for every child in our public schools. It is with pleasure to hand over to our resident MC. Come, MC. People must say that I'm taller than you. Come. Mr. Kolani Masango. He's a very familiar face in the entertainment industry who needs no introduction at all. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We hope to enjoy the evening.
Now, we would like to call upon the Director General from the Department of Basic Education.
So yes, you asked me actually to convey the message of thanks on behalf of the Department of Basic Education. And so you can see it's a whole different person standing actually here in front. But it is with great pride and appreciation that we have extended our heartfelt to the Education Omnibus Council on the remarkable milestone on its 31st anniversary. The United States actually we're about 9 years away in terms of when the council can apply for actually a package in that regard. That is if SATO and the CTU will actually sign it off going forward. For over the 50 years, the ELRC has stood as a pillar of stability and dialogue and motivation within the South African education system, fostering an environment where labor and employer can build a consensus for the betterment actually of education, and especially our learners and actually educators. The ELRC's unwavering commitment to collective bargaining has ensured that the voices of all our stakeholders are heard, repeated, and translated into agreements. The balance of the needs of educators, the learners, and the system actually as a whole in that regard. By ensuring fair and constructive negotiations, the ELRC has contributed to this very foundation for the South African learners and actually educators. In the realm of the dispute The resolution, the ELRC has provided not only a mechanism, but also a culture of peaceful problem solving, and it has, and if there is actually any disagreements, it has shown actually that they can deal with that in terms of actually a peaceful manner. And many people don't know actually, don't only deal in terms of a formal dispute resolution process, it also plays a key role in terms of assisting the provincial education departments in terms of dealing with the conflicts in that regard. The council's mediation and arbitration, the services that have over the years resolved thousands actually of disputes with fairness and a process of integrity, and enabling the education sector to remain focused on its core mission of quality education. Its work in terms of advancing the labor management partnership is particularly noteworthy by fostering trust and shared accountability between labor and the employer. The ELRC has also actually a modern and forward-looking approach to labor peace within national education. The partnership is not merely about preventing actually conflict, but about actively building a culture where all the parties can work towards a solution for improving learning outcomes and enforcing the workplace and its well-being. As the Council, they celebrate this anniversary, may they take pride in terms of the legacy that they've built actually over the years. It is one of the inclusive actually the councils what you can find. I just met actually one of my other colleagues that I've not seen for but actually 15 years at lunchtime. And he also does actually work in terms of the food actually industry with regard to actually working with all the councils in that regard. And he actually informed me actually that the councils themselves is a total actually chaos in that regard. And that we can say is not actually within this particular council. On this occasion, we reaffirm our commitment to working alongside the ELRC and the parties in the years ahead, strengthening the collective bargaining, enhancing the dispute resolution, and also in terms of deepening, most importantly, the labor management partnership actually going forward. The work of the council will continue to be essential in shaping an education system that is fair and just and effective for all South Africans. Before I end off, I also just want to say congratulations to the council in terms of actually achieving a clean audit once again. But I think what the chairperson has missed to say is also for the first time in 31 years, all the provincial chambers has achieved actually 100% a performance rate. So we can give them actually a hand in that regard actually as well. To end off, congratulations once again on this historic on the milestone. May the next chapter actually of our journey be even more impactful and transformative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll now be moving straight along to call upon our next speaker, and that is the General Secretary for SATU, Dr. Mugwena Maluleke.
Today we celebrate the Education Labor Relations Council, not just for its longevity, but for its unwavering commitment to building bridges where others saw walls fall. For 31 years, the ELRC has stood as a pillar of democratic engagement, a sanctuary for reasons negotiations, and a catalyst for equity in our education system. It has been the quiet architect behind countless resolutions. Yesterday or the other day, I have said that we have seen 2,500 disputes. And today when I meet other people, Prof asking me, what is the role of the ELRC? I still ask myself, without dispute resolution mechanism that we have in the ELRC, teachers would be spending a lot of money paying for those legal services. Without a preventive measure, which is collective bargaining by the ELRC, would be having chaos in education. You have said 2 days ago that in the best interest of the children, that's why we have labor peace. So those who are still asking the question, what is the role of the ELRC? It is to prevent dispute by collective bargaining. If we fail to prevent, it will then be escalated to a dispute, and you have a dispute resolution mechanism, which is very, very helpful for us as part of our engagement. So, but this anniversary is more than a milestone. It is a moment to reimagine. As we confront new challenges, digital disruption, generational shifts, and the urgent call for transformation, this council must not only reflect, but it must renew itself. Let this be the year we deepen our resolve to make education not just a right, but a lived reality of dignity for every learner and every educator. In the world, we're talking about another pandemic, 44 million teachers that we need in the world. And about of the 44 million, 22 million are in SADC. Our schools are overcrowded, the infrastructure is dilapidated, and yes, we have to work together to making sure that teachers and the student work in a dignified environment and that they are recognized because their lives matter. The work that they do matters. And that's what we are supposed to be working together to ensure that the ELRC take forward this particular moment. To the stewards of this institution, General Secretary and your chairperson, your work does matter to us. Your courage to convene, to listen, to act does matter. In a world fraying at the seams, the ELRC seems reminds us that dialogue is not weakness. And there is another father of dialogue tonight, Godwin Cause. It's not a weakness, but strength. That justice is not a slogan, but a system. And that transformation is not a destination, but a daily discipline. May the next chapter be bolder, more inclusive, and even more visionary. We thank you, and we reaffirm our commitment as an organization, SATU, representing the largest teachers in the country and in the public, that will continue to support you as the ELRC, but work with us, work with all our unions to making sure that we improve our education. Let's improve the well-being of our teachers and our children, and we commit ourselves to support you for stopping this barbaric system that is happening, selling of post. It's just barbaric. It is not supposed to be allowed in a constitutional democracy. It has to be stopped, and we support you in that particular endeavor. And thank you very much for allowing me to talk too much. Bamalenga, Mamandla.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maluleke, for that inspiring address. Ladies and gentlemen, we move swiftly right along to Mr. Sawa, who's the CTU-ATU.
The CTU-ATU will, as in the past, support the ELRC in the fulfillment of its mandates and goals. With the AGM that concluded again this afternoon, it is the consensus of the meeting that the ELRC, through governance structures, who is led by Dr. Bono, and the administration structures, who is led by the GS, Dr. Volka, and the team, is running a smooth, well-organized bargaining chamber that can all be proud of. Especially in this year, where we started off at the end of last year regarding the post provisions, as well as the budget constraints that we had, the ELRC took lead in making sure that it doesn't happen again for the 25-26 budget year. From the CTU-ATU side, we really applaud that. The CTU-ATU, which is the ELRC, everything of the best in its 31st year of existence. And as Dr. Maluleke has said, there's a lot of, and Mr. Faker said, there's a lot of old horses at this stage moving out, and it will be our endeavor to make sure that the ELRC stays focused and make sure that we can continue for another 30 years. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, would now like to call upon the General Secretary, Dr. Volka, to come through and introduce our keynote address. Am I too loud?
I just want to start off by thanking you. And I hope you will get why I am thanking you. I want to thank you for having shown respect to our speakers who have taken time off from their busy schedules to come and address our conference. Some of the speakers that we had in the past 2.5 days, their daily rates is 10 times the cash gratuity that the ELRC has offered. So you need to appreciate that. I'm thanking the audience, Chairperson, because I know they're not going to disappoint us even this evening. I've started noticing some noise coming from some other tables, and I was double checking if everyone had a tag before they walked in here. Because the people that were with us in the past 2 days, they showed full appreciation of the guests that we had invited. And I want to share a short story with you before I introduce the guest speaker. You know, when my little one started knowing how to read, whenever I walked around with her to the shops, she would always stop me and ask me, "Mommy, why do they always write there? Or there's always a board with inscription." Of course, she didn't use the inscription, the writing, right of admission reserved. And I had to explain to her that the reason that there's that inscription there or the writing on that board, it simply means that we are here at the mercy of this store. If we don't conduct ourselves according to what the store expects of us, the store reserves the right to ask us to leave. And we don't do that at the ELRC events because we always invite attendees that show respect for the time that our guests have taken from their busy schedule to come and participate in our programs. Thank you, colleagues. Let me quickly go through why am I here. I'm here to introduce a face that is familiar to all of us who have been around in the space of employment field. Professor Halton Childel is the one that I stood up last year and I said, if I was a heavy drinker, I would have gone around the corner and finished a bottle of wine. Because I had an audience, and the audience was expecting me to rise on the podium and introduce the guest speaker. And the guest speaker, when I phoned him, he said, "I'm stuck somewhere in Gordons Bay. There's been miscommunication with my office." And I'm like, how long is it gonna take for him to go and put up a tie and a suit to get to the waterfront? Then, but we had an ace up our sleeve. We were celebrating the retirement of our shop steward #1, Professor van der Walt. So he saved the evening then. But tonight we need no saving because Professor Childel is with us. Not only is an attorney, but he's also an emeritus professor of public law at the University of Cape Town, UCT. He played a key role in drafting the Bill of Rights. Thank you, Prof, for being one of those who have paved the way for all of us to enjoy the type of rights that we have today. Can we please give him another round of applause? He helped shape important labor laws in our country. He's one of those who have contributed in the writing up of the Labor Relations Act 1995, which also is protecting us as the workers till to date. He has also served as an acting judge in both the High Court and the Labor Court, and is a seasoned arbitrator. I think Bernice wrote for me here that this is a fun fact, but for me, I think it's one of the critical and the crucial. It's very nice, and you travel the world with pride when you know that from the country, your country, you've got those that are making a contribution at the global stage. Professor Childel is the first South African to sit on the ILO's Committee of Experts on Application and Conventions and Recommendations. Another round of applause, colleagues. He keeps lending his expertise to help draft legislation, not only in South Africa, but globe-wise. Let's give him the final round of applause before he delivers his keynote address. Thank you, Prof. The floor is yours.
I think what was missing is that I've had a fairly long history with labor relations and education. I was involved in the drafting of the Education Labour Relations Act in 1993. You'll remember that educators were excluded from the Labour Relations Act under the 1956 Act. And so, Dr. Moleleke, I put my hand up. I was there at the establishment of ELRC. I said, no more applause. I also remember being called down to work on a weekend in Cape Town to finalize the draft of the SATU Constitution by J. Naidu, who facilitated the amalgamation and the formation of amalgamation of a number of teacher unions and, of course, the formation of SATU. I too remember running workshops on labor law for the ELRC in the 1990s. So it is actually wonderful to be back, and it makes me feel extraordinarily proud that I was part of a process that has ended up in what I think is probably one of the most successful of the bargaining councils. I've just got to work out how I do this. Okay. I live in Simonstown, not Gordon Bay, but it's still an hour's drive. and I'm reminded daily of missed opportunities when I drive past and see the frigates rusting in the docks and almost never used, a submarine that sometimes goes out in the bay, the others are in need of repair, and that makes me think of the aircraft still in their boxes. All that arms deal spend for so little return. Imagine what the return would have been if that money had been spent on school infrastructure, educator training, and salaries for educators. Education should have been the priority to address the two legacies of apartheid, namely poverty and inequality. That is why we find ourselves where we are today, a poorly functioning state, particularly at local government level, an economy with one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world, an education system that continues to reproduce apartheid inequalities between schools for the urban middle class on the one hand and those in the townships and rural areas on the other. This has to change. And drawing from the title of this address, this is an endogenous change, a change that our society has to address. I will briefly discuss exogenous changes later on. So the latest National Development Plan seeks to address the state of affairs with the aim to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality by 2030. It recognizes that this can only be done, and I quote, by drawing on the energies of the people, growing an inclusive economy, building capabilities, enhancing the capacity of the state, and promoting leadership and partnerships throughout the society. But how are we to draw on energies of the people, grow the economy, build capacity? That question raises another legacy other than poverty and inequality, bequeathed by our colonial and apartheid past, and that also needs to change: adversarial collective bargaining. Trade unions first emerged in the United Kingdom as it industrialized, and they struggled to win the right to bargain collectively and to strike over many years. It was not just a struggle resisted by employers, it was a struggle for workers to get the right to vote and then to change the law that regarded unions as unlawful and collective bargaining as a monopoly. It was a struggle that produced adversarial collective bargaining, a history not very different from our own. And so when trade unions were formed in South Africa by migrant English miners who came to work on gold mines, they formed militant trade unions, which were just as militantly resisted by the mining companies. But being white, they had the vote and politically able to conclude agreements with the mine owners on what they called a civilized wage for white workers in artisanal and supervisory jobs, and a prohibition of employing, and I quote, native labor, inverted commas, in those jobs. And when mine owners decided to allow those agreements to lapse and employ black workers at lower rates. The white miners rose up in an insurrection we all know as the 1922 Rand Revolt, which nearly toppled the Smuts government at the time and did in the 1924 elections, and could only be brought to heel by strafing strikers by aeroplanes. By the way, that is the first time in history, and it's not Guernica in Spain, as is commonly believed, which took place in the Civil War. Although the Industrial Conciliation Act of 1924 sought to provide collective bargaining process, conciliation boards, and institutions, industrial councils, it excluded, and I quote, pass-bearing natives, inverted commas. Again, historically interesting that only men at the time were required to have passes. And so when African women entered the clothing industry, they were recruited into the garment union by Solly Sachs, L.B. Sachs's father. And we were only forced to enter into a separate union when the nationalist government required African women to carry a pass. The adversarial tradition of collective bargaining became part of the DNA of employers and their organizations, and particularly those trade unions that organized African workers and were excluded from the Industrial Conciliation Act. And like the history of the UK, the hostility was not confined to the workplace. The apartheid state banned and detained trade union leadership, criminalized strikes by African workers, and brutally broke up strikes and protests. African trade unions that had to fight not only for recognition and participation in the collective bargaining system, after so many years of employer and state hostility, and structured in the manner of English trade unionism, it's no surprise that they developed a militant and adversarial approach to collective bargaining and to any consultative engagement with employers. On the other side of the labor relations coin, employers were both resistant to trade unions and retained a management style that was hierarchical and autocratic, managing through discipline rather than leadership and consensus. And so, trade unions largely remain in the paradigm that the best way of achieving results is through a resort to force, both lawful and means. Collective bargaining, and this is not, I'm not speaking about the Education Labour Relations Council here, but I am talking about just generally, that collective bargaining has been reduced to zero-sum bargaining, strikes are increasingly accompanied by violence, and disputes settled rather than prevented. And all of this continues to happen in a country that is in an economic crisis, that is shedding jobs, and is expected to shed a further 30 to 100,000 jobs as a result of the 30% US tariff hike. But let us compare this with other systems that developed a more collaborative system of labor relations in the wake of a crisis. If we look at Germany after the World War II, the need to reconstruct a destroyed economy required not only the institution of collective bargaining, but also the participation of workers in the enterprise through works councils, initially resisted by the unions, but now wholeheartedly embraced. Let us also compare Japan, which also had to reconstruct the destroyed economy after World War II. The sudden freedom after the war to organize led to a very adversarial system initially, but developed into a system of collective bargaining and deep consensus-seeking managerial style, partly cultural, but partly good leadership. The style is often compared with the United States system of collective bargaining, which is and remains adversarial, largely because of employer hostility. And they say that the decision to relocate a site in the United States takes a day, and then years to effect that decision, fighting worker opposition. While a decision in Japan might take a year of consultation, but only a day to implement. Let us remind ourselves that both employers and trade unions declined the offer in the 1995 LRA to move to a more consultative mode of engagement, in both refusing to establish workplace forums, other than, of course, in education, where the SA Schools Act provides for educator participation in school governing bodies. So let us return to where we find ourselves today, as I've said, a poorly functioning state. And let us again return to the National Development Plan to address the state of affairs and the aim of eliminating poverty and inequality by 2030. And my question is, how is this going to be done? Education is fundamental to poverty and to reduce inequality. While triple B, double E may be a middle-class eliminator of poverty and inequality, the real job of eliminating poverty and reducing inequality for the mass of our people, the working class and the unemployed, is through education. And that requires the collaboration of all stakeholders, government as policymaker, government as employer, professional associations, trade unions, business, civil society, and student bodies. Let us consider the reality of education at the moment. The official 2024 matric pass rate was announced at an impressive 87.3%, a figure that should be cited with pride. But the fuller story reveals a deeper challenge. When examining the cohort of learners who began grade 1 in 2013, only about 51% of these people, young people, completed matric successfully. Even more concerning, of those who passed matric, only 47% achieve a bachelor's pass, a minimum requirement for university. And fewer than 15% of these learners choose or are able to enroll in universities. These are not mere numbers. They represent the futures of thousands of children denied the opportunities that education should guarantee. Alongside these grim statistics, we face alarming dropout rates, with many learners leaving school prematurely. Furthermore, approximately 81% of children in South Africa cannot read for meaning by the age of 10, and in global terms, our country ranks 107th out of 141 in skills readiness, a stark indicator of the quality of education. All this unfolds despite education consuming 20% of our national budget, amounting to more than 429 billion in 2022-2023. And that begs the question, why with such investment are outcomes so persistently poor? The strains of COVID-19 and austerity budgeting have further increased pressures on the system, causing teacher retrenchments, all leading to increased class sizes, overstretched educators, compounding the challenges that we face. These issues only reinforce the urgency for robust collaboration and partnership. And there are good examples of what collaboration can achieve in education. The National Education Collaboration Trust, which through collaboration between government, business, labor, and civil society, has mobilized national resources to achieve real and sustainable improvements, as envisaged in the NDP. It has built strong partnerships with the teacher unions, including SATU, NAPTOSA, NATU, SAU, and PIU, in intensifying educator development programs in basic education. Teacher professionalization programs that target subject advisors, curriculum specialists, teachers, and school managers, all to improve quality and inclusivity. There are strategic partnerships with government, business, labor, and civil society to support and upscale education improvement initiatives. They've reached over 17,000 schools, over 93,000 teachers between 2015 and 2009. They've trained and resourced over nearly 8,000 teachers and 199 subject advisors. It has mobilized over $1 billion in funding over the last 5 years, with approximately 60% of this amount coming from government sources and 40% from the private sector. And since inception, $2.5 billion. It's quite extraordinary. I learned all of this in preparation for this address. Good news is not news in the media. And why, may I ask you, did you ask me to discuss something that you all know about and have put into practice? I'll leave that question for you to answer. And there are other good stories. I think the South African Basic Education Employment Initiative has achieved key outcomes, creating over 1.27 million earning opportunities for young people as assistants in schools, reaching a broad, inclusive cohort of youth with 65% female participation, which is significantly higher than the national youth employment average of 42%. It's prioritized poor young people, with 75% of the participants coming from quintile 1 to 3 schools, representing the most undeserved served communities. It's assisted teachers by supporting classroom discipline and preparing lessons and reducing administrative burdens. According to the survey by the presidency, the vast majority of educators surveyed want the program to continue and believe that it has strengthened learning outcomes, indicating strong educator approval and recognition of the program's benefits in the classroom, provided that they are not seen as substitutes for permanent teaching staff. Then at a more local level, the collaboration, again, orchestrated by the Trust in Vuhani, when the department, the community schools, and civil society raised contributions to rebuild schools that were burnt down and vandalized in a service delivery protest. This is an approach that should be developed, in my view, in other crucial sectors, in health, in housing, employment generally, transport, local governments. It's education that leads the way. So now let's look at the changes that are and will be forced upon us, the exogenous changes contemplated in the title of the address. And I only want to pick two: pandemics and artificial intelligence. The speed with which COVID spread across the world, and a world not properly prepared and one that responded in panic rather than in a considered, evidenced, and collaborated manner. There are going to be future pandemics, and yet there has been no considered review of our response or preparation for the next. While on the theme of collaboration, it was a collaborative effort on the part of governments, scientists, the medical professions, and pharmaceutical companies that developed vaccines in an extraordinarily short period of time, all of which saved millions of lives. And it was a collaborative effort in NEDLAC between government, health in particular, business, labor, and civil society in the formulation of COVID-related policies and subsidies for workplaces. That's a story that also needs to be told. But we need to review the non-pharmaceutical interventions employed by our government, given the huge social and economic cost of lockdowns and of school closures. The middle class survived working at home and using online learning resources, while the working class and the unemployed bore the brunt of the lockdowns and the school closures. The effect of school closures on children was broad and multifaceted, impacting on them emotionally, academically, socially, and physically. I do not have to detail the severe impact that the lockdowns had on the economy and on working class families. The non-pharmaceutical interventions were introduced without considering the economic and social consequences, and that is why we need a collaborative endeavor to get government, scientists, academics, business, labor, civil society to review those interventions and prepare for the next academic. And why do I say this? Firstly, because the World Health Organization in 2010 developed an evidence-based approach to pandemics. And that approach concluded that these non-pharmaceutical interventions, masking, tracking, lockdowns, and school closures, had little, if any, effect on the spread and the intensity of pandemics. China imposed the most draconian lockdown first. And of course, in the short term, the infection spread did slow. But there was no reason on that basis why the World Health Organization, after visiting Wuhan, disregarded its own approach and recommended masking, lockdowns, and tracking. In a study of the impact of the non-pharmaceutical interventions introduced in the United States, a study reviewed the non-pharmaceutical interventions. Because the United States has a federal system of government, the interventions were decided by state governments. They found that Republican-governed states introduced lockdowns later than Democratic-governed states and for shorter periods. The same applied to school closures, masking and tracking. The Democratic-run state interventions were more onerous and more intense than those in the Republican states. The infection and fatality rates of states were compared up until the introduction of vaccines. And they found that there was no significant difference other than briefly during the initial period in infections and fatalities. The same applied to school closure. The infection and fatality rates of school-going children compared across the states prior to vaccination, there's no significant difference. And quite importantly, children had substantially lower rates of infection and fatalities compared with adults, and particularly the elderly, which became known early on in the spread of the pandemic. And as an aside, once the vaccines became available, the study found that the Democrat states pushed vaccinations more intensively than the Republican. And as a result, fatality rates were significantly lower in Democrat-run states. More people died because of Republican government in their states. The next change is artificial intelligence. It has many benefits, but the challenges are serious and need concerted action. There are data privacy concerns, dependency on technology, dehumanized learning experience, teacher displacement, and performance assessment. I think that AI is going to change the educator's role in the classroom in several ways. Of course, it will automate routine and administrative tasks like grading, attendance, and initial assessments, freeing up teachers to focus more on planning lessons and teaching. The tools will provide real-time, data-driven insights on individual student performance and learning gaps, and teachers can use these insights to tailor instruction and interventions more effectively. Rather than conducting broad, uniform lessons, teachers can focus on customizing learning experiences and addressing each student's unique needs with AI as their analytical assistant. Teachers will play a crucial role in training AI algorithms by providing data and validating AI outputs. They should also have the responsibility to guide students in ethical use of AI, helping them to understand bias, fairness, and responsible AI literacy. But despite AI's growing capabilities, teachers remain essential for providing emotional support, motivation, and social interaction. AI augments but does not replace empathetic human connection necessary for effective education. And all of this requires collaboration between government, labor, and civil society to develop policy and to prepare educators for these new roles. We have a huge task before us, and I've not even touched on the collaboration needed to respond to Mr. Trump's imposition of tariffs. Fortunately, we have institutions like NEDLAC to provide the forum for doing so. But what the examples of collaboration in education and NEDLAC demonstrate is that we can and do collaborate to respond to a crisis. But would it not just be better for us to do it as a matter of course? Thank you.
Those were some great insights once again from the Prof, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, another round of applause, please. Okay, I would now like to invite the chair to come and give us the vote of thanks before we get into the informal part of the program.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of a memorable evening. Thank you for sharing in our celebration. I'd like to extend our appreciation once again to our distinguished guests who always support the programs of the ELRC. And a special thank you to Professor Chidl. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the end of our formal program. And I just want to say, let the festivities begin. I wish you a wonderful evening. Thank you.
I'm going to call upon the band now, because I understand we do have a band that's on standby to come and usher us into the festivities part of our proceedings this evening. But ladies and gentlemen, we thank you so much for being with us over the past 3 days. It's been quite insightful. GS, thank you so much for planning this as usual. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I'll be seeing you soon. I'm still around. Enjoy the evening.
South Africa's labor terrain is shifting faster, deeper, and more complex than ever before. And when the landscape changes, leaders must rise. Join us from the 11th to 13th of August 2025 at Empress Palace in Johannesburg for the Education Labour Relations Council Labour Law Seminar, under the theme, Adapting to an Evolving Labour Landscape to Promote Social Justice. It's a strategic gathering of policymakers, union leaders, educators, and legal experts converge to chart the future of work, rights, and equity. Education Labour Relations Council Labour Law Seminar 2025, where transformation begins. When labour evolves, justice must lead.